The Not Most People podcast is for those who despise mediocrity, reject the status quo, and challenge conventional wisdom. Join host Bradley Roth and discover what separates the winners, outliers, and standouts from most people.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. This is Bradley. I am your host for Not Most People, the Not Most People podcast. I'm excited to be here, and you are listening to the first ever episode of this podcast. So welcome. And this is something that is very new for me, so bear with me. I'm going to start out this episode, number one, as a solo episode. And I'm just going to basically give you a rundown of what Not Most People came from. Where did that idea come from? What does it mean? Where are we going to go with it? What are you going to get out of this podcast? And what is the vision moving forward? So I'm going to start with a little story. Actually, nothing real specific, but this whole idea of Not Most People started, I think, from a young age. And it wasn't really clear to me back then, but it became clearer as time went on. But it started as a kid. As a kid, you know, you're told, you know, some kids more than others, you know, when you ask, why are these the rules? Why do we do this way? Why this? Why that? And a lot of times from adults, from other people, whoever it might be, a lot of times that answer is because I said so, because he or she said so, because that's the way it is, because that's the rules. And for me, that never was enough for me to hear that kind of answer. It still left me wondering why. What's the reasoning? What's the logic behind that? You know, just because someone says so or this person says so, does that mean it's right? Does that mean it's correct? Does that mean it's grounded in any sort of real reason? And so I always questioned that growing up. Anytime someone told me something without a reason or without logic behind it that didn't quite check out or make sense, it caused me to question a little bit more. And every time, just a little more. So as I grew up, you know, in grade school, you're curious, you ask questions. And again, a lot of times your questions, they get kind of like shoved to the side or pushed to the side or not really thought through and given kind of those like, because I said so type answers. And I noticed as I got older, as I got into high school, as I got into college, that was kind of how things were a lot of times. That because that's the way everyone did things, that's the way that it's supposed to be done. And I know that's an easy way to think, and I know that's how the vast majority of people think. Right? That's how most people think. And it just never sat with me. It never made sense. I realized more and more as I got older that, you know, most people out there who kind of followed the crowd, kind of, you know, did what was considered normal, quote unquote, most of them really weren't living the kind of life that I wanted to live. You know, you look around and the vast majority of people kind of share and reshare that kind of conventional wisdom. Grow up, follow the rules, get good grades, go to school, get a job, get a career, get married, and you'll live happily ever after, right? And it's just, I found it's not that simple. And I found that a lot of times that advice it didn't really lead anywhere that I wanted to go. The people who were following that advice, the people who were sharing that advice, they weren't where I wanted to be. You know, everyone following that conventional wisdom seemed to be living a life that I didn't want. Maybe not as a whole, but in one area or another. And I noticed that the people who I looked at that were living that life that I wanted, whether it was, you know, being super healthy, wealthy, having freedom, etc., they always did things a little bit different than the crowd. They kind of thought outside the box. They did things their own way. They have a clear why and a logic behind their beliefs and actions. And most importantly, I realized that success in anything is not attributed to luck, like the vast majority of people would, come to believe. I think, when we're young, we believe anything's possible. And then as kind of life hits us a couple times growing up, we tend to become a little bit more cynical. We say, the people who are out there who made it, who are, super successful, they got lucky. And I've learned that, luck is BS in most cases. There's a little bit of luck here and there, but, luck never leads to real lasting, well-rounded happiness or success. And so I realized that, what is it that these people must be doing something differently? They must be thinking differently. And I found that they were. I found that when I sought out information from people who were where I wanted to be, that their way of looking at things, their view of the world, the way they approach things was different and oftentimes opposite of what most people did. And so I really came to realize that being part of most people, aka the majority in any area of life, generally wasn't a place that you wanted to be, right? Think about it. Most people are not very healthy, especially here in America these days. What separates those who are from those who aren't? Most people are not in passionate, fulfilling relationships, right? Divorce is higher than ever. Even, people who are in relationships and they're together and they don't get divorced, a lot of times, if you ask them to really rate the relationship, on a scale of 1 to 10, it wouldn't be that high, right? What's the difference there between those who have those great relationships and those who don't? I notice that most of the people who kind of follow that standard dating advice and Hollywood chick flicks and all that kind of stuff, typically didn't end up super happy. And then when it comes to wealth, right, that's one that's really easy to measure. That's especially in this Western world, one that a lot of people look at. Most people are not wealthy. Most people are either just scraping by or they're stuck in the middle class where they're never going to really be able to do what they want, what they truly want. They're never going to have financial freedom. They're going to be stuck working a job till they're 60, 70, 80. And I said, why would I want that? That's what most people are doing. What are they doing that's leading to that? There's got to be a cause and effect for everything, right? All these groups of most people are just not really that desirable. It's often the minority, the outliers, that are doing the things that you look at and you're envious of, right? Like when people look around, are they like, oh man, I wish I could be like Joe next door, or living like, making 50K a year, scraping by and go on a vacation, very rarely. Or do they look at like the celebrities and the successful business owners and those people and they say, I envy those guys. That's where I want to be. That's how I want to live. And it's not just like a greed thing, but like a happiness thing, right? A freedom thing, right? So I noticed too, if you listen to almost every big podcaster, author, thought leader, influencer, you might not notice it, but I started to notice that they say the words most people countless times when they're talking. Almost every podcast episode, every time they're giving a speech, they use the words most people countless times. And every time they're referring to it in a way that you typically want to move away from. Like they start the sentence, most people do this, most people are this, and it's never something that you really want to be. They're using it for contrast to show what you don't want to do or what most people are doing wrong. They never say, oh yeah, most people are doing all of this right. You never really hear that. Or most people, they never say, oh, most people are, ripped and successful and yada, yada. You never hear that, right? Most people often do things that keep them in the mediocre majority, right? It's almost always framed that if you want to get to where you want in any area of your life, that you need to act different or opposite of what most people do. And that's a very, very common theme that I've found. And there's some universal principles that apply to all areas. And then there's also tactical things within different areas that I found that the people who really succeed on a high level tend to do very, very differently than others, right? If everyone did what those people did, the majority would be successful. Most people would be successful in that area, but they're not. So there's usually something different or opposite that kind of separates those people. So that's like a lot of what brought about this concept and what we're going to explore. And we're going to be talking, I'm going to be doing some solo episodes like this for sure, like shorter, quick hitter ones, but we're going to have interviews with these people who are not most people, who found a way to achieve success, and we're going to find out what it is they did differently, right? Whether that's from a young age they were different, or they learned this, or they approached this differently that way. We're going to find out what created those outliers, and then hopefully you can take that and learn to emulate and copy that. And not so much even the what to think, but the how to think differently, right? So the focus of this show, or movement, you could call it, is kind of two-pronged. So the first part of that equation is the success mindset, or not necessarily mindset, but again, the success separators, right? What I've been talking about, what is it that separates, the super successful in any area from most people? Okay, there's a lot of stuff out there that's kind of like this, I understand, but we're going to look at that side. And then also, so a lot of what do the successful minority, we'll call them, do differently than most people. And then the second part of that is, like I've been saying, a lot of this mainstream advice or kind of conventional wisdom is what tends to lead most people towards mediocrity, or towards results that they don't want, towards places they don't want to be. And so how do we shift our mindset and start thinking for ourselves and thinking differently, and not necessarily blindly following the societal norms that are kind of pushed on us constantly, the ones that kind of eventually wear us down, that keep us from, chasing our dreams, that make us want to blend in, that penalize us for standing out and doing things differently? How do we learn to think for ourselves? How do we learn to kind of think counterintuitive to a lot of what we hear both today and what we learned growing up, right? These things ideas that get ingrained with us, that society is kind of pushing out there constantly. How do we think differently? Because until we learn to really think and shift our thinking that way, you could hear the what all day, but it's not going to matter, because other than you're just regurgitating tactics. If you really want to learn it yourself and how to embody that and how to become not most people, you have to learn how to think differently, how to think that way. So at the end of the day, this movement is designed to not only share those insights from those outliers, but also shift the way we think, how we examine information, and teach us to kind of challenge normal, not just for the sake of being rebellious, but in a way that helps us find the truth, right? Truth in the sense of what really, you could say truth just from like a right and wrong perspective, what's true, what are lies, that's one part of it, but the truth of what really is what we need to learn, what we need to hear, what's really going to lead us down that path that we want to go down, that's going to take us to where we want to go. Now, the future vision for this it's really big. I know it's still brand new, but I'm super excited. This is not something that is related to my current business. Maybe down the road, we'll see, when I have a different business, but it's not something that I started to make any money. That's not the goal right now. If it eventually does that, then awesome. Great. But that's not the focus at all right now. Right now, it's a podcast and it's an Instagram page. And it's a movement where hopefully I can provide a ton of value, and the guests that I have on can provide a ton of value, and people can take that and make changes and make a difference in their lives, and hopefully go, reroute themselves towards bigger and better things than maybe where they're headed by following kind of the, again, quote unquote, conventional wisdom. Now, there are plans also for a blog in the near future, so stay tuned for that. I love to write, and that's going to be a part of this as well. And then maybe, in the further future, maybe we'll have some swag, we'll have some t-shirts and posters and, cool stuff like that. But that's not really, again, the focus right now. I'm just kind of painting the picture of where this could go. I'm trying to think of this as a movement. I think this is going to be something that many people, or at least this is what I'm hoping, that many people are going to be proud to be a part of, that people can really identify with. I think there's so many people out there that have always felt, or maybe not always, but started to feel, once they started to kind of do things a little bit differently, that they got pushback, that they felt like kind of like an outcast, or like people didn't get them or understand them. And then when that happens, you might feel a little bit like an outsider. You might feel like, where are all these people who think like me? Am I just weird? Am I different? And there are a lot of those people out there. And when you meet them, usually it's pretty awesome, because you're like, oh, thank you. Like, this person is like me in the fact that they're different from everyone else, right? They get it. They're trying to do big things. They think differently. They're outside the box. And whenever you meet someone like that, there's that instant connection, right? You're like, okay, I found someone that I'm on the same page with, that gets it. And we're trying to create that kind of community here, where if you've ever felt that way, you're probably going to feel right at home here, like you might not in other places, right? And that's kind of the big overall goal here, is to build that community of like-minded people where we can all be on the same page. But I mean, obviously not on the same page where we all agree with and everything. I don't believe in that, right? But a place where we can come together, share ideas and similar thought processes and a similar vision going forward. So again, thank you for listening. We got a lot of awesome stuff coming your way. Again, this podcast is not for most people. That's okay. If you listen to this and you're like, it doesn't resonate with me, that's cool. Like I said, not for most people. This is for that 20%, right? 80-20 rule. And so again, please, if you enjoyed this, we're trying to get off to a strong start. If you could share this, if you could like our posts on Instagram, give us a follow, subscribe to the podcast, share it with a friend. That would be super, super helpful, and it would be greatly appreciated. And I'm looking forward to where we're going. So that's it. Episode 1 over. Don't be most people.